Well, the crypto conference 2021 wrapped up over the weekend in Miami. Our Zack Guzman is back from there. A lot of antics happening over the course of the weekend, both at the conference proper and off-site. You had the chance to talk with some of the big players who were there as well.
Yeah, we sat down with Shark Tank's Kevin O'Leary, and he walked through some of the things. If you recall, back in May, on Yahoo Finance, he called out some of the sustainability concerns, and he called that absolutely right, because a couple weeks later we saw Elon Musk reverse the position at Tesla in terms of accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment there, citing the same sustainability concerns. But now Kevin O'Leary says that he sees those concerns getting fixed in the next 12 to 18 months, and what was Bitcoin's biggest problem, he says, is now becoming its biggest opportunity. And as he sees it over the next decade, Bitcoin for sure will be outperforming the performance of the S&P 500. But here's what he had to say about all those ESG concerns and how he sees that battle shaping up.
You know, it's both a huge problem and a massive opportunity. I prefer to look at the opportunity. So here's the setup. Here's what happened. I work with institutional clients and sovereign funds, pension plans. I'm constantly working with them on a lot of other projects that I'm involved in. I have investments in many, many different financial services companies. So I'm in a constant dialogue with them. And as the excitement, if you want to call it that, or the noise, as Bitcoin was passing through $55,000, $60,000, I started to ask these institutions, because I know their allocations, and most of them are 5% weighting in gold, for example. And I'm asking them, look, are you going to get into crypto? If it is crypto, what are you going to do, and what's the allocation going to be on a mandate basis? So let's say they're running $1 billion mandate. That's not uncommon for a sovereign fund. Here's what they said to me over and over and over again. We would love to put a 1 to 3% weighting into Bitcoin. The only one we're interested in is Bitcoin as a property, not as a currency. So the same as buying land or a building. However, we are now subject to ESG committees and compliance committees that are involved in things like, ethics, human rights, all that. And the asset has to get filtered through both compliance and ethics committees. Then we can allocate. I said, so what's the problem? They said, huge problem. ESG on Bitcoin. The majority of it is mined using non-sustainable forms of energy, primarily coal. For many of the miners that started the journey in Bitcoin, 17, 18 years ago. I had not heard that before. And I started hearing it every day. And I called it out on that Yahoo Finance interview, and the proverbial poo-poo hit the fan. I took a lot of flack, but it's obviously on the mind of the institutional client.
When it comes to that, though, obviously there are sustainable miners out there. You can use cleaner energies if you want and shift away from coal. And we are seeing that, even the way that China's had its, mining sector completely changed with regulations over there. So, is that enough maybe to change it? And are you seeing kinds of the things that you would want to see to fix those solutions now?
I decided to reach out to some of the large holders and say, look, you're aware of this problem. So I called up Tyler Winklevoss and said, look, what do you think? He said, we know this is a problem. We got it. Why don't you give a call to Steve Lee? Let's talk to them. What about Fred over at Coinbase? So we started to get this dialogue going about how do we solve this problem? Because here's what we're thinking. Yes, it's a problem, but think of the opportunity. If we could blow through the log jam, solve this problem for the institutions, that's $1 trillion worth of buying power right there. So if you want to see Bitcoin achieve 100,000, 200,000, 250,000, $1 million a coin, you got to have the institutional player. Everybody in this hall today is incentivized to solve this ESG problem. Everybody, every single person, for that singular reason alone. The question is how. Now, there are two sort of thought streams on this. One is to tag coins, green, not green. And a lot of people don't like that because then the currency is not fungible if you're trading as a currency. You make one coin, different than another, that's a problem. The other is to somehow decide as an investor you're going to buy a sustainable miner that's using hydro or using solar or maybe, an energy source like wind that you can say is completely sustainable, and just buy that miner and hold the coins on the balance sheet in perpetuity, which seems to be of great interest to sovereign funds.
Yeah.
So I'm going in two directions. I'm trying to get a software solution so that we can tag, for example, Hut 8. Jamie has all her coin on her balance sheet. Every single coin she's ever mined. all sustainable. Well, she's a sustainable coin, even though it's, nobody cared about that 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Why not somehow give an identification to that coin, so at least it's sustainable in one way or another? So the industry is trying to solve the problem. I'm trying to be part of the solution. I'm an investor, but I know with certainty I cannot own coin that was not mined sustainable.
Have you tapped deals with any sustainable miners out there? Because we talked with Bitfarms, one of those Canadian operations that use hydropower. There's a few others that are really focused on it, but are there ones you specifically like?
There are 3 private miners that I'm in discussions with that are looking for capital to build out wind and solar. Of course I'm interested in that. And one of them's in West Texas, there's another one in a different geography, in a different country, one in Europe. My strategy there is to simply say, look, okay, what do you need? I'll be an investor. Let's say I end up with a third of the company or something. I want to be paid back in coin. I don't want fiat. I'm an investor. I want a distribution in coin, and I'll know with certainty that that coin was mined sustainably, and I'll never sell it. It'll be just property.
That is the tricky thing too, though, because you're right. I mean, it's all fungible, so it should be, it doesn't matter. You can't track it. It says Bitcoin is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Of course, though, if you're talking about prominence and where the coin's coming from and the problems there, we were talking with Tim Draper yesterday, and his connection with Bitcoin that he won through the Silk Road auction from U.S. Marshals, and I mean, you could say the same thing with cash, right? I mean, there's dirty cash, clean cash, and it's tough. It's tough to separate.
At the end of the day, there's a new sheriff in town, and it's called ESG. Every single institution, including from Larry Fink on down at BlackRock, who put out his ESG letter, his sustainability mandate, this used to be fringe. It's not fringe anymore. You have to be sustainable in terms of how you look at investing, or you're going to lose your investor. And you're going to be, someone's going to point a finger at you and say, look, you don't seem to give a damn about sustainability. I do give a damn. I mean, everything I touch is sustainable investing, because the entire employee base that I have, I've probably got 10,000 employees through my supply chain of the companies I own. I bet you 90% of them are under 35 years old and really care about this issue. And if they thought that I wasn't on board with this, they wouldn't be my employees. Everybody that works for me knows that I care about this, because I was one of the first graduates of environmental studies, the first cohort ever. Yeah. And when people didn't care, I care. I think we will solve the ESG issue on Bitcoin in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think over the next 10 years, the Bitcoin asset itself will beat the S&P. So if you're thinking about a 7 to 8% average over a decade on the S&P, I think Bitcoin would be 300-400 basis points over that. I really do. I just think that the minute we solve the institutional ESG issue, Katie, bar the doors, because people don't understand the majority of the world's investments are in the institution and the sovereign fund. I mean, that's where the real money is, and that, for this conference, is the real opportunity.
Yes, I mean, we're hearing, we obviously saw kind of the impact of Elon Musk tweeting about some of those sustainability concerns in May, and we saw Bitcoin's price collapse about 30% in what was the toughest month in the last decade. But you're just hearing from Kevin O'Leary there talking about his optimism that it does get solved. And guys, I mean, as far as a price call goes, maybe not the boldest one to say that it's going to outperform the S&P 500 return by about 400 basis points over the next decade. But I mean, this was a guy who called some of these price jitters here back in the beginning of May. So now changing his tune to say that some of those problems will get solved in the short term here.
Well, look, Zack, as he said, he talks to institutions, and speaking their language is how many basis points you'll outperform the S&P 500 by. And Zack, I know you got a whole show coming up, and viewers can find out all about Bitcoin Conference 2021 then. But I just want to ask you what the vibe was like. You spent 3 days down there. I was exhausted just following it online. I wasn't even paying attention all that closely. What kind of was the energy down there for this event?
It was wild, and I mean, it was wild in a lot of different degrees. You got the fact that you had people there waiting for hours to get in, not just the first day, but also the second day. You had shenanigans on stage. You had Jack Dorsey kind of having getting defended there from one protester who had come up and almost made it on the stage. And then you had people who were repping Dogecoin there who did make it onto the stage and interrupted a panel there. Overall, though, I mean, you talk to people who were on the ground there who paid money to get into this conference, and generally the takeaway from the people I talked to was that it was a massive success in terms of the way that there was some substantive conversations there being had, and a lot going back to, you know, some of this adoption cycle, the things that we've been talking about. And you had El Salvador coming out saying they're going to be accepting it as legal tender, kind of the celebration at the end of the conference, but a lot of real progress being made when you step back and look at where we're at right now. And we're going to be chatting with Mike Novogratz, or at least showing that interview as well, hitting on the same themes when it comes to institutions getting more and more comfortable with the idea of putting more money to work in Bitcoin. And that might be a bigger thing to focus in on rather than some of the shenanigans that took place there on stage. But overall, a wild time down in Miami, enjoyed by all.
I'm shocked that they said it was a massive success. Zack Guzman, thanks so much for your coverage down there. Really good stuff.
All right, one of the coolest stories of the last month was news that United Airlines had entered into contract to buy at least 15 supersonic jets. For someone who was alive in the 70s and 80s and actually saw the Concorde land at Miami International Airport, this was big news. Let's bring in the founder and CEO of the company that's going to build this aircraft. Blake Scholl is Boom Supersonic CEO. Good to have you here. I'm a little disappointed that I got to wait till 2029 to fly on this plane, but top speed, as you anticipated, will be Mach 1.7. Do you think you'll be able to deliver on time?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that makes Boom a really special company is we have already built and rolled out history's first independently developed supersonic jet, the XB-1. That's our prototype for the Overture airliner. It rolled out last fall, and it's going to be in the air in just a matter of months. And with that aircraft taking really the design for Overture off the table, proving that it works in a real airplane, we are excited to be delivering Overture to passengers this decade.
And Blake, speaking of this, I know it's not only through work. I was having a lot of these conversations. Many people that I didn't think would take notice of an announcement like this have been talking about it over the last week or so. Any idea just of how much people will be willing to pay to ride one of these jets? Because it seems like there certainly is a lot of excitement out there for it.
Well, you know, we believe that a world in which more people can go more places more often is a better world for us to live in, a better world for our children to grow up in. And if you say, you know, COVID aside, why don't people travel? Well, it's because flights take too long. They cost too much money. They're too inconvenient, and we worry about the sustainability. So we want to build a future in which flights are faster, more affordable, more convenient, more sustainable. And with Overture, there's a 75% reduction in cost versus Concorde, you know, designed half a century ago. So we're looking to bring down the prices of high speed so more people can benefit from this.
That's the key, and I'm glad you brought that up because Concorde was never a break-even venture for Air France or British Airways. So is the fuel, for instance, you're going to use sustainable carbon neutral fuels. Are these already in use? Because this plane is expected to test fly the XB-1 the end of this year or early next year, right?
Yeah, that's right. These fuels exist. In fact, we've already run XB-1's engines on one of the highest blends of alternative fuels ever used. And we actually saw greater performance on alt fuels versus traditional jet fuel. And so these fuels today, they're used on other aircraft up to about 50%. And Overture is the first airliner designed from the ground up to be compatible on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. And what that means is supersonic flight is going to be able to be completely carbon neutral. And one of the things we're especially proud of with our announcement with United last week is that they're actually going to do it. They're going to run Overture carbon neutral on sustainable aviation fuel. So that means that the airplane that you most want to be on from a speed and comfort and convenience perspective is also the one that's the best for the planet. And that's really, really exciting.
But here was the other issue with the Concorde. There was opposition to allowing it to land at airports in the United States because of the sonic boom. Do you see that issue ever coming back, that people, you know, not in my backyard would put a red flag up to stop this?
Well, we have to remember that Concorde was designed, in the 1960s with slide rules and drafting paper, and it used converted military engines that were super loud. And today we've got huge advancements in airplane technology. For example, Overture runs with modern, quiet, efficient engines that we're building together with Rolls-Royce. And what that means is around an airport, this isn't going to be any louder than today's latest generation subsonic aircraft. So this is something that I think, airport communities around the world are going to be very excited to have, because there's no net new increase in noise and an incredible capability to get around the planet faster.
So Blake, you have this deal with United. Are you in talks with any other legacy airliners about a similar type deal anytime soon?
Well, this is something that appeals to international airlines, most valuable passengers. It's an incredible new capability. It's the first real speed up in air travel that we've had since the 1950s and 60s in a mainstream way. And ultimately, this is something that every international airline is going to need to be competitive. So lots of airlines around the planet are interested in supersonic.
A lot of us are rooting for you. I know you got the United deal, Japan Airways Airlines deal, but I got to ask you, Virgin Galactic, they're promising with their spacecraft right now, but what they're really developing is a craft that would take you from New York to Tokyo in 3 hours. That's a lot faster. Do you worry they might beat you?
Not really. If you look at the technology here, we have chosen the speeds that we have because that operates within technologies that are proven safe, reliable, and efficient. So we want to get supersonic flight into the hands of as many people as possible, quickly as possible, and then we're going to keep iterating. Today we're talking about Overture 1, but there's going to be Overture 2, Overture 3. They're going to get progressively faster, more affordable, available to more people in more places.
We are wishing you the best and look forward to having you come back on the day you do that test flight with XB1. We want it to hit supersonic speed. So, Blake Scholl, Boom Supersonic CEO, all the best.
Well, shares of Academy Sports is rising for the second straight day after that company's earnings came out and beat estimates. It saw record quarterly sales as well in the first quarter, sales up 39%. And I want to bring in the CEO of Academy Sports and Outdoors right now. That is Ken Hicks. Ken, it's good to see you. So talk to us about what you're seeing sell right now, whether this is reflection of reopening trade, what other trends are driving some of the sales that you're seeing, and what things are particularly popular.
Well, we were open throughout the pandemic, and Texas and our markets have been open. So we've seen people come in and pick up new hobbies and interests like fishing, camping, hiking. And so that has continued. That's one of the things that's been very good, is that people picked up a new hobby and they're doing more of it. We also are seeing people going back to some of the things like team sports. Baseball was very good this year. So was biking. And we're seeing things, people get back into outdoor cooking as they begin to get together and gather. So it's people picking up new interest and people going back doing old things. And some of the things that are selling well are tents. We're going through tents like crazy because people are going out camping this year as a way to stay safe, but also have some fun outdoors.
Ken, Brian here. You mentioned on the earnings call this week, you are about $100 million short in terms of inventory relative to where you would like to be. Where are you seeing some of those shortages and what's causing it?
Well, part of it is the supply chain. It's extremely stressed. Deliveries are slow, and production is not, in some areas, is not all the way back to where it was. So some of the outdoor areas, we've got some inventory issues. Bicycles is a place where we don't have as much stock as we like. And some of the fishing, some of the team sports areas. But overall, our inventory is what I call acceptable. It's just not where we would like it to be for being in stock so we can serve every customer and we've got the presentation we'd like.
And Ken, thinking about those inventory type challenges that you guys have had. How much have you learned about the business, maybe in terms of levels that might be better going forward, or are you all hoping to maybe get through this unprecedented couple of year period and have the stores, the assortment and the mix kind of look like it did pre-pandemic?
One of the things that we learned is we can operate with less inventory, and we're working on a major supply chain initiative to improve it because we can turn inventory a lot faster. We turned our inventory prior to the pandemic a little bit under 3. Last year we turned it 4 times. So 4 times probably a little too fast, but we know we can turn the inventory quicker and be more responsive to the customer by faster supply chain, but also better allocation, getting the right inventory in the right store in the right quantity.
Ken, wages are going up pretty sizably in retail and restaurants. You have Walmart, I think, is a $15 hour minimum wage now. Amazon, you can work in one of their DCs and pull in over $20 an hour. What type of pressure is that putting on your business?
We're seeing more challenges in getting people. Fortunately, in our stores, we're able to stay staffed, but we have taken our wages up. We continue to offer a competitive wage, but I also think that we offer a different environment, and selling fun, which is what we do sell, is enjoyable, but also we're working with our team members so that they have more flexibility in their scheduling.
So Ken, you talked about inventory giving you guys more flexibility on margins and these rising wages. Have you guys raised your prices? And if so, by how much?
We have unfortunately had to raise some of the prices due to cost, but overall we've tried to hold key price points and also hold our price to a very, very strong value level. We're known as a value retailer, and we're still below most of the market, but in some areas, bicycles is one because of duties and materials where prices have gone up, but we make sure we still have a $49.99 kids bike and a $99 adult bike.
Ken, quickly before we let you go, KKR still has a 31% stake in your business.
Yeah.
Is there any insight into how long they plan to hold that?
That's their decision. Hopefully they're happy with what's happened with the stock, so the longer they hold it, the more money they make.
Fair answer. Ken Hicks, great to see you as always. Chairman, President, and CEO of Academy Sports and Outdoors. We'll catch up with you again soon.
A crime wave is sweeping our nation with murder rates up by double digits in many cities, including large cities like New York and LA, but also in smaller cities like Omaha and Louisville. Bill Bratton has served as police commissioner of New York, Los Angeles, and Boston, and he is out with a new book. It's called The Profession, a memoir of community, race, and the art of policing in America. And we are delighted to have Commissioner Bratton here with us today. Commissioner, always good to see you. So look, this book is certainly very timely, right? There has been this intense backlash against the police in the wake of the George Floyd murder. You've seen a lot in your 50-year career in law enforcement. How do you even begin to build trust again between the community and the police, especially trust with the Black community?
It will not be easy because we've lost so much of it. In many respects, and I talk about this in the book, it takes me back to the 1970s when there was also a great deal of mistrust of American police. And over the years, we got a lot of it back, even in the Black community. But the events around the death of Mr. Floyd have really set things back dramatically. Good news is that it can be regained, and the George Floyd bill that's working its way through Congress, if it ever gets out of Congress, might be, particularly for the Black community, a significant first step in building trust with their police forces once again. It's going to take a lot of hard work, and I talk about it a lot in the book. The book is a combination of leadership, history, and things that have worked and things that didn't work. So it's very timely. And my co-author and I, Peter Knobler, spent 4 years putting it together, but I think it's a good read.
So what are some of the keys to better policing as you see it? There's been a lot of conversation around police reform, calls to defund the police, for example, but also a lot of calls to increase funding around some other social issues that perhaps the police shouldn't have to deal with, like dealing with folks with mental illness or the homeless population. How should we be navigating moving forward, at least when it comes to that police reform? And what do you make of some of those calls to defund police?
This is where it's important to understand the history of the last 50 years, because we're repeating many of the same mistakes of the 70s. We deinstitutionalized the mental institutions, mental illness institutions, put those people out in the street, created the homeless population. We depoliced, we reduced the size of police forces in the 70s as crime was beginning to grow. We decriminalized, basically took away a lot of the tools the police had to work with. We're seeing some repeat of that now in the calls for defunding the police. The idea for some people is take money away from the police and deal with the emotionally ill, deal with the narcotics disabled, deal with many of the other societal ills that society has not figured out how to deal with. Myself, I'm skeptical that money is going to be allocated in sufficient amounts to deal with those issues. So I think the police are going to end up still being the safety net for some time to come. As we fail dealing with emotionally ill, with the homeless, with the drug epidemics, police ended up being the safety net as everything ended up being dumped into the laps of the police. And that's where we get into so much trouble because we don't have the current funding, the current staffing to be able to successfully deal with those issues that we do pretty well, all things considered, but we were never designed to deal with the scope, scale, and intricacy of the societal problems of today.
Commissioner, we know that rising crime is a major issue in cities across the country. It's a major issue in the New York mayor race, which is taking place right now. As the former police commissioner of New York, you have a unique perspective there. You're also a resident of the city. What would you like to see the next mayor of New York City do?
Well, New York City's mayoral race is a microcosm in some respects of the current debate around the country. We have the criminal justice reform movement on the left that in the case of New York City went too far, too fast. And that's evidenced by some of the candidates in the race who are still talking about defunding the police, reducing the size of the New York police force in the midst of the largest crime wave in 30 years. Doesn't make much sense, I think, to the average person. On the other hand, that we have this issue going forward that we are going to have to basically grapple with a long, hot summer ahead of us. Good news is that we have if you will, things we have learned from the past, how to deal with it, but it's going to cost money. And the problem is, even with that money, it's going to have to be used for police overtime because most departments are having trouble hiring to fill vacancies, and they're losing large numbers of officers as a result of the tensions of the last 2 years. So we're not in a particularly good place, but out of crises comes opportunity. In my case, I consciously went into New York twice and into LA to deal with crises. That's what I like to deal with. As you get out of crises, you get opportunities, and you can expedite change. If we're smart about this, we can take advantage of this current crisis, the many crises we're actually dealing with, find common ground that we can all get something out of coming together and move forward. Hope is not lost, but right at the moment, there's a lot of pessimism, a lot of concern. Reminds me of the 1990s all over again. But we got through the 90s, didn't we? In New York, before the epidemic, was probably the best it's ever been until the legislature got into the mix and messed it up.
Yeah, I'm a lifelong New Yorker and I've lived through all of what you just talked about. I'm happy to hear, though, that you are hopeful, Commissioner. I know that you support a lot of reforms that have been called for since George Floyd's murder, including mandatory police body cameras. But where are you in terms of abolishing qualified immunity, which protects police from criminal charges if they use deadly force in the line of duty? Will that have a chilling effect on people wanting to be part of the police force?
Policing believes that would be the case, that it would make it even more difficult to attract young men and women. The idea that a police officer who is oftentimes called to make a split-second decision in a life-threatening situation, if he makes an error that he may lose his home, may have his salary basically taken away. Why would anybody want to put themselves at that risk? It's ironic that we want qualified immunity That means limited immunity for police officers who have to make those split-second decisions. Meanwhile, the people who are designing the bill in Washington, in state capitals, and the prosecutors have absolute immunity. They can't be sued. The scales of justice are a little out of balance when you look at that. Can qualified immunity as it's currently structured be changed? I think so. But to do away with it, it would not be fair to police officers who are expected to make split-second decisions. And in that regard, this is where the defunding movement is ridiculous, because we need to basically fund more training for our officers, so when they do get into a tough situation, they make fewer and fewer mistakes, so they're not at risk, and the people they're interacting with are at less risk also. I would guarantee if you asked 9 out of 10 people in New York City, or for that matter, in Albany, or in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, who were debating qualified immunity, they couldn't explain it. It is a very difficult issue to understand. On page 460 of my book, I consciously designed that section of the book to try to put it in layman's terms so that the average person could understand what this issue is all about. It's a complex issue, not easily defined, not easily understood, and not easily changed.
Well, the book is called The Profession, and it is an eye-opening look at policing in America and your 50-year career in it. Commissioner Bill Bratton, always good to see you. Thanks.
Headlines were made earlier this week when a ransomware attack on JBS's systems threatened some of the meat supply here in the U.S. and bringing up more cybersecurity concerns across critical infrastructure here in the U.S. And as lawmakers continue to look at this issue, I want to bring in Democratic Senator Jon Tester from Montana, certainly focus on the issues, at least as it relates, Senator, to the agriculture part of the equation. So I just kind of want to start with how concerned you are by the JBS news that we saw and really what seems to be an increasingly vulnerable critical infrastructure, at least on the technical side here in the U.S.
Well, I'm very concerned about it. Consolidation in the marketplace of agriculture, whether it's cattle, grain, has been a big issue for a long, long time. And what we saw with the breach of JBS shows us we've got another problem. Not only is the marketplace severely concentrated, but now bad actors can attack this pretty easily, and have. And JBS was a prime example. And if it happened to them, it can happen to others. So the real question here is, as you've already pointed out, what are we going to do about it? And I think there's a number of things we need to do. We need to go back to the Packers and Stockyards Act passed 100 years ago and make sure that it's fully enforced. And then we've got to make sure these companies share information with our intelligence groups within the government who deal with these issues all the time. And I think that's how we're going to be able to get to it. Get to a solution to the problem. Look, the bottom line is this has happened. It's happened multiple times over the last month. It's going to continue to happen. When companies start using better computer hygiene, I guess that's the word, that will help a lot. But we've got to share information. And what these hacks have shown us is the concentration in our food system, in our food chain, is not good. It's not good for the consumers. It's not good for the country. Certainly not good for the folks in production agriculture.
Well, and as you alluded to, Senator, it's Julie here. Certainly, it's not limited to the agricultural industries, right? We've seen it at utilities. I believe the MTA in New York City recently revealed a hack, and obviously it's not in these organizations' interest to be hacked, right? They should have better security. What is their willingness, though, to cooperate with authorities if that is part of the answer? One would think they would want all the help they could get.
Well, there has been hesitancy, and you might say, why would there be hesitancy? It's money. People are concerned maybe their stocks might drop if people know fully what happened. But the bottom line is this is bigger than money. This is about critical infrastructure for this country, whether it's in food, whether it's in energy, whether it's in water, as you pointed out. And information sharing is really, really important in all this so that we can find out who did it on a timely basis and hold those people accountable. I don't think individual businesses have the capacity to do that. And in fact, what we've seen is that the ransoms have been paid. And in my opinion, that's the worst possible thing that can be happening. So there's work to be done here, a lot of work to be done here. It shows about some inherent problems we have in our food systems that we need to deal with in a common sense way. And it also shows that we're very vulnerable to cyber attacks, and we need to do better on that front too. And it's one of the reasons, as the chairman of the Defense Appropriations, that cyber is my #1 priority.
Senator, so much focus in our world of financial markets on inflationary being transitory or not transitory, but you are a working farmer. What are you seeing on your farm right now in terms of inflation, and do you think it's transitory?
Look, I'm seeing some concerns around inflation. Now, whether it is a bump in the economy because of the pent-up demand of the pandemic, or whether it's something that we're going to see continue to move upward is yet to be proven. But trust me, the experts I talk to say it's a bump. It's going to level off by the end of the year. We're going to be back to where we have been over the last 20 or so years. But the bottom line really is it's a concern for me right now. I will tell you that when housing prices are through the roof, because you can't buy a pickup, I do my own repair work. Parts have gone up noticeably. So we've got some challenges out there. We've got to make sure that we're dealing with that in a common sense way also.
Well, and Senator, on that point, speaking of your home state, you guys are getting another congressional seat next year. There's been a huge influx of out-of-staters moving into Montana, not just in the pandemic, over the last couple of years. I'm just curious what you're hearing from your constituents on the pressures they're seeing in their home markets, because I can pull up a Zillow listing for Bozeman and Whitefish. I mean, it is really crazy out there.
Look, you're absolutely correct, and it's really an impediment to our economy across this country, and Montana is not excluded from this. I think affordable housing, workforce housing, the president put in his infrastructure bill. I think it's important we address it. If we don't address it in infrastructure, address it somewhere else, because it's not allowing our economy to be able to expand the way it needs to expand. And look, we are in competition with China economically and militarily too, as far as that goes. We need to make sure that we do everything we need to do at the federal level to make sure that our economy can continue to grow if we're going to continue our position as a leader in the world. And housing is a big part of that. So I think we need to address it. Housing prices, you're right, whether it's Bozeman, Missoula, just about anywhere. In fact, I will say anywhere, housing prices have gone up markedly in our state. And it's been a real anvil for business to be able to hire people, for a place to live. It's been a problem with businesses moving into an area to be able to expand that economy. It's a big problem. We need to deal with the federal level. There are some programs out there, tax incentives and other things that we can do to help move the housing program along, but it needs to be a priority for Congress.
And related to the housing issue, I know you're putting forth a bill to address the medical professional shortage that has been seen in some rural areas. And, we were chatting in the break. I mean, local in your state can be 90 minutes, 2 hours away. But in the pandemic, that wasn't good enough for a lot of people. What are you hoping to what bottleneck are you hoping to unlock there, for your state and many others that really face a critical shortage of healthcare professionals?
I'll get to the doctor residency thing in a second, but I will tell you one of the solutions is good broadband, and that's been deficient too. So good broadband for telehealth is one way. Another way is this bill that you just talked about that I'm carrying to allow small hospitals to be able to have residencies. And I think that what's been shown is when a doctor does a residency in an area, they tend to stay in that area. And I think if we can get these folks into more rural parts of our state, they'll tend to stay there just like they do in more urban parts. And I think that is good for rural America. I can tell you the small town I come from hasn't had a doc in probably 25 years. We've got physician's assistants. They do great work, but it'd be great to have a doc too. And in order to do that, I think expanding the residencies is one of those keys.
All right, Senator John Tester of Montana. Senator, really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us this morning, and I look forward to visiting your state in a couple of months' time, and hopefully for years to come.
I look forward to having you out the great state of Montana, and bring all your friends too. It's a marvelous
That's
place.
Right. I will. I fully conflicted here. I love Montana. All right, Senator, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
We turn now to the Reddit forum, which, as we talked about earlier, sort of birthed many of these meme stock ideas and still is even today. We want to bring in the man who founded that, although he's no longer associated with it. Jamie Rogozinski is the founder of WallStreetBets, the forum on Reddit. And Jamie, talk to us about your thinking about the forum now, what it has become, and sort of what you first intended it to be versus now.
Well, first off, thanks a lot for having me. And what started off as a forum for people to get together and discuss these high-risk trades has carved out a space for them in the market so that it's grown so much so that the individuals collectively make a participant in the market that's the same size as a hedge fund and equally as clever as the hedge fund. A lot of times there's a lot of talk about how the retail investors, they don't know what they're doing, whatever. But time and time again, they've proven to be able to spot these inefficiencies and jump on them. I noticed a lot of talk about the short squeeze, and that's what they're going for. But if you really look back at what the types of things that they're doing, they're looking for inefficiencies in the market, and they're looking to profit from them. They've been doing that for several years.
Well, and Jamie, we were talking earlier about Keith Gill, and this all started the GameStop saga, at least as you kind of trace it back. And he wasn't the only person who circled this idea, but yeah, you watch Keith's videos, and he obviously has thought about this name. He knows what he's doing, and I guess as you look back at the beginning of WallStreetBets, and go way back, Yahoo stock forums and all that. There's certainly pumpers on that stuff, but it feels like ultimately, the forum was stood up as a way for people who knew what they were talking about, but maybe weren't working at a hedge fund to discuss ideas in the market, and that maybe what happens today on WSB isn't quite exactly how you'd hoped it would be back in the day.
No, I mean, it's turned out into something better, right? You have now a collective of millions of market beta testers on the actual stock market and making it more efficient and making it more productive, right? Like before GameStop made it really famous, we had a lot of incidents. One incident where a guy took out infinite margin, right? Or the free money cheat code, as it was called, where he put in $5,000 and he discovered this oversight by the broker and basically ended up getting a massive amount of buying power, right? Obviously, we're able to address that. With regards to being able to move prices around, I noticed that you had Virgin Galactic on there earlier. Virgin Galactic was actually on the radar January-ish of 2020 when they made the cover of Business Week magazine because they were doing a different maneuver called a delta squeeze or later a gamma squeeze, right? This is a maneuver with stock options that's able to really leverage the big money from the large funds to be able to push the price up more easier, right? But then you have situations where you have so many people coming in there making so much volatility that the brokers broke, with Robinhood having to stop trading GameStop as well as many of the other brokers, right? But now that's being addressed as well, right? They're talking about the settlement dates. And last I saw, the SEC was also looking at changing the incentives for these payment for order flow companies. So every time these guys get together, they find a way to profit, and they do, and then the system has to kind of catch up, and they have to plug in these inefficiencies and make the whole thing better.
Jamie, what we're seeing in some of these stocks, AMC, BlackBerry, you name it, is that market manipulation?
I mean, what's market manipulation? You have people that are buying and you have people that are selling, right? Like if you have a fraudulent intent, it's somebody that goes up there and lies and says, oh, BlackBerry's got this new hologram cell phone that does whatever, and it's a lie, that's market manipulation and that's fraud and it's illegal, et cetera, right? It's really clearly defined. If you work for a company and you're starting to promote it without disclosing it, or if you have too much ownership, more than I think 5% of the stocks, then blah, blah, blah. There's really clear regulations, but people coming together and say, let's just push this price to the moon and being really transparent and there's no defrauding taking place. That's absolutely what the market is.
All right, Jamie, really interesting stuff about what continues to go on here in those market opportunities that people are taking advantage of. Jamie Rogozinski was the founder of WallStreetBets. Thanks, Jamie.
Bitcoin in your 401k could happen soon. And I'll tell you what, Coinbase is teaming up with For Us All and could be coming to a 401k near you. We talked about this story before earlier this week. And today we have the Chief Investment Officer, David Ramirez, here to tell us all about it. This is really fascinating. And I guess I have to think, well, yeah, of course this is going to come. But you're one of the first, if not the first. How did this project come about and how did you develop these ideas?
Yeah, well, we've been looking at the space for quite a while, paying close attention to the growing body of academic literature showing that cryptocurrency, small allocations can have a material improvement to overall expected return and expected risk. So we certainly saw that there was good financial reasons to have a small allocation. But what really blew us away was just how much demand there was, both from plan sponsors who offer 401k plans and the employees themselves.
David, what's the case for investing in Bitcoin in this way? I mean, some would argue that there's just way too much volatility to essentially put your money there for retirement.
Yeah, I totally understand. So I think, when we take a step back, there's been a sea change in the investment world over the last few years, with large institutional and professional money managers increasingly taking advantage of alternative asset classes, including cryptocurrency. Look, you look at the big endowments from Yale, Brown, Harvard, they all have allocations to cryptocurrency in their endowments. Even CalPERS has allocations or exposure to cryptocurrency via investments that they have in Riot blockchain and some of their venture funds. When you look at the overall industry, 60% of institutional investors now say that there's a role for cryptocurrency in their portfolio. And a lot of that has to do with the historical returns and correlations. When you look at cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, the Sharpe ratio for Bitcoin exceeds that of every other asset class going back to 2014, with really low correlations with other asset classes. So a small allocation is a great portfolio diversifier, or can be a great portfolio diversifier, increasing the expected return while lowering the risk. I think there was recently an analysis done by Russell that found that just a 5% allocation to Bitcoin alongside the Russell 1000 produced excess returns of over 6%. So there's definitely a good reason for doing it. The question is, how can you help employees use that asset class prudently? And that's where it's really critical that we provide both education, guidance, and guardrails so that the average American can make appropriate use of cryptocurrency.
Well, with all the Bitcoin volatility, we've seen U.S. regulators somewhat hesitant, at least at the SEC level, to approve a Bitcoin ETF. And there are also regulatory concerns that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has put forth. I'm just wondering, what kind of hurdles did you have to overcome to bring this to customers?
Yeah, so definitely the 401k space is highly regulated. Not only do you have SEC regulations that you have to take into consideration, but you have ERISA, which is the body of law that governs 401k plans. I think with respect to ERISA, there was recent guidelines from the Department of Labor that came out a couple of months ago that looked at how can prudent investment managers include alternative assets. In this context, they were talking about private equity. And some of the key things that they suggested you look at is, what's the liquidity of the asset class? Can you make sure that people can sell? Is it appropriate to put in place caps on allocations to those alternative asset classes? And so we definitely used that guidance both from the Department of Labor and the SEC in constructing this program. But at the end of the day, I think all of us are aligned in one key thing. If you're going to provide an alternative asset class to employees, you need to do that within a context that provides support, education, guidance, and guardrails so that employees can use it effectively.
Well, let me follow up on, I know you're just offering Bitcoin at first. You have plans for Ethereum, maybe Dogecoin. And how does that fit into what you were just describing? Because people have to be educated the right way and they have to be suitable for the investment.
That's right. So to be clear, right now, when we've launched out this new program, it allows employees to transfer up to 5% of their 401k balance into a cryptocurrency window where they can invest in up to 50 cryptocurrencies that are available on the Coinbase platform. Now, we're not making all cryptocurrencies available to participants. So one of the roles that we play as an advisor is to review what's available on the Coinbase platform, analyze each of the different options available to ensure that what employees can have access to does actually make sense in terms of a portfolio. Dogecoin is in fact available on Coinbase institutional platform, but that's not going to be an asset class that's going to be available, or a digital asset that will be available to employees.
And David, you've got about 400 employer clients. How many have signed up for the platform so far?
Yeah, so we're beginning to roll it out. What I can tell you right now is that 60% of all of the companies that come to us are expressing a strong desire to an interest in investing, making cryptocurrency available to their employees. And that closely matches a lot of the survey data that we see coming out of Gemini that shows that 60% of Americans are interested in investing in cryptocurrency. When we look at employees, look, millennials, 49% of them are already invested in cryptocurrency. And that is one of the hardest groups of employees to engage to start saving for retirement. Our hope is that by making cryptocurrency available, not only can we help improve portfolio expected return and risk, but more importantly, we can make the 401k more engaging and relevant in this modern era.
Yeah, an interesting take there to get younger people to save up. David Ramirez, For Us All co-founder and chief investment officer. Appreciate you stopping by today.